Assalamu alaikum and welcome to our fifth installment of Reset with Nadeem Khan. Um, Today we will be talking about leadership. We have an amazing guest as usual. Her name is Hira Ali. Before I make the introduction, I would like to just do a very quick recap on what we've done so far. So in the Reset session, what we have so far covered is we've had five guests. The first one, Heather, who talked about mental toughness and how to understand yourself through self-reflection. We then moved on to understanding your passion, finding your passion in life with Saad, and then we understood the difference in careers and how they would are evolving after the pandemic. We later moved on to understanding the importance of technology and what kind of skills you will need in the digital future of after the COVID, which is the new normal. And just on Saturday, we had Dr. Mudassir, who covered the variety of different skills that will be required taking the COVID forward. So today with me, Nadeem Rahman Khan, I will be covering I will be talking to Hira Ali about leadership and garnering insights from her expertise in this area. Now, just before we start off, I'd like to give a formal introduction of Hira. Now, Hira basically is the chief executive officer of Advancing Your Potential, which is a UK-based company. She's the managing director for International Women Empowerment Events. She's an associate certified coach accredited by ICF, International Coaching Federation. Recently, she has published a book, Her Way to the Top, which has been acclaimed internationally. Also, she's a professional member of the Association for Neuro-Linguistic Programming. She frequently publishes articles in the HuffPost, Thrive Global, Forbes Woman, Elevate Network, Woman Entrepreneur, Gulf News, The Female Lead, and many more. So she's been featured and interviewed in local and international magazine, newspapers, and radio channels. One of the recent being by a former BBC journalist, Dan Perry. Also featured as a role model in the New York bestseller book, Girls Who Do You Want to Be, along global female influences. Her famous podcast is 8 Minutes of Learning with Hira Ali on career development. So let me give a warm welcome to Hira Ali. Hello, Hira.
Hello, how are you, Nadeem?
Alhamdulillah. Welcome to our I'd say show Reset, and thank you for joining us. Thank you for giving your time to join us today.
Oh, I'm very excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. So I think I've given a brief introduction of where we are today. So I think that my first question to you is around leadership. We ended the last talk of around us being, I think, in the lockdown, the importance of being a self-leader, the importance of leadership has emerged to a new level, especially with the task that you're given. I remember one of my colleagues who used to work with IBM. He was saying that IBM has recently transformed in the sense they've turned all of their managers into leaders, right? And the reason for doing that is because they consider every individual as a leader. Now, why is this happening, and what we can do in the pandemic to actually emerge as self-leaders? Can you please elaborate on this?
Okay, so that's a very good question, Nadeem. And I think going forward, leadership is going to be very different. Why? Because there are certain traits in leadership which have always been very important. You can't deny that. But leadership in crisis situation demands a different sort of leadership.
Yes.
And we have seen, and the reason why I'm also very excited to talk about this is because here is our chance to embrace the best of both worlds, which is women-specific leadership traits, gender-specific strengths of males, and gender-specific strengths of females. And also there has been a Stanford study which has proven in the past that people who have embraced the good strengths which women leaders bring to the table and the good strengths which male leaders bring to the table, and when they have use both of them to their advantage, they've leveraged both these sort of strengths, they have done exceptionally well. And I think in the current crisis, I don't want to start a gender war here by saying that females are better and males are not. Definitely, I'm not coming from that point of view. But the reason why I'm excited is because in the past few months, in the couple of months that we've seen that a lot of countries with female leaders have been doing exceptionally well, right? And there have been reasons for that. For example, if you take, of course, New Zealand, if you see Jacinda Ardern, or if you see Germany, if you see Finland, so these leaders have deployed certain characteristics, certain traits which have made them more popular, which have made them deal with the crisis more efficiently, as you would call it. And I think the number one thing is, of course, self awareness and empathy. And being empathetic is going to be so important, especially in a time like this where everybody is going through a very unusual time. We are going through an extremely stressful situation. People are worried about their jobs, people are worried about their income, people are worried about whether the business is going to survive or not, how will they be able to sustain their families. So, and then I think we all right now are, as I always say in my webinars, we're all grieving losses of all kinds, right?
Yes.
Loss of relationships, loss of money, loss of business, loss of interactions, loss of freedom. So the very first and foremost trait, which is going to be really important going forward, it will always be, and it's going to continue, is being kind and being empathetic. In the past,
Can I sorry stop you
yeah,
now? For people, what do you mean by empathy? Now these are two questions. The firstly, I just want to open up a few things. You said that there are gender specific traits. Can you just slightly open up what you mean by that? So an example is, I understand that both myself and my wife are working at the same time, right? And I
absolutely.
understand she has particular strengths and I do. Why is it necessary to tap into both of the strengths, especially in the pandemic, for our listeners? And what do you mean by empathy? A lot of people just hear the word, but if you can just briefly elaborate on what you mean by empathy.
Okay, so that's a very good question. And I think what you were discussing with me a while ago as to
Yes.
how you have been doing it with your wife, the way the balancing act and how
Yes.
you have been, sharing sort of a leadership at your home.
Yes.
That is exactly something which I share with my husband at my home. And this is something which is really, really important. Is being able to relate to the other person and to be
Yes.
able to understand that whatever that person is going through, I could also be in that person's shoes and I could also go through similar situations. So how would I want people to talk to me if I'm going through a crisis? It's that feeling, right? Joe, I'm going to talk about two different things. So what exactly are women's specific strengths? Women's specific leadership strengths are being empathetic, the ability to make other people feel comfortable, humility. Okay, so women have a lot of humility. They like to share power. And for them, it's not always like, the women who are doing well now these days are women who are sharing power
Mm.
and who are giving credit to the entire team. So it's not like an alpha macho sort of a leadership style in which you take all the credit, or in which you say that, it's my way or highway. I'm sorry, you have to just, agree with what I'm saying. So they're open to feedback. They're very inclusive. When they are making decisions, they involve people.
Mm-hmm.
Self-awareness is very important. They know what feelings they're going through, whether it's anxiety, whether there's frustration, and they know how to dispassionately detach themselves from that situation and look at things from a very holistic point of view.
Mm-hmm.
These are women specific strengths. And of course, male specific strengths are assertiveness and decisiveness. Men make decisions very quickly. They do not do analysis paralysis. In fact, they have been, like, in the crisis situation, and it's not because I'm saying it because I'm a woman. Research has proved that a lot of female leaders have emerged successful because they have been decisive and they have been, assertive. But yes, typically men leadership strengths are being decisive, and this is something which we need going forward in a global pandemic right now. The crisis that we are facing, we need to make quick decisions. Speed is important. We
Yes.
can't really delay. Like, for example, if we have to make a decision for our own family, it's a matter of survival, right? So we can't do an analysis paralysis and say,
Yes.
okay, so this is what I'm going to do. We have to quickly make decisions. So decisiveness is again something important.
Acha, two questions come here. You've mentioned about gender specific. Now, in the studies that I've also looked at leadership. I feel that TK, there can be females that have these qualities, but can male also have these qualities?
Of
Can they
course.
acquire it? Because what I've seen is the best leaders that emerge have a combination of both of these skills. Like with companies, not just with companies but global companies, you can see that these traits that can be acquired, or are they just come with personality?
देखिए, you have to understand one point is that of course God has made men and women differently. So there are differences in the brains of men and women. It's
Yes.
scientific proven.
Yes.
I haven't come up with this theory. It has been proved, and a lot of scientists have talked about this because of the way the prefrontal cortex
Yes.
in the brains work, and different theories are there which suggest that obviously leadership styles do differ from men to women, between men
Yes.
and women, but leadership traits can be acquired. I mean, there's no way why you men can't develop empathy or women can't be more assertive. I mean, it's something which we all can learn to embrace. And I think this is going to be really moving forward because you will have to make tough decisions, right? You'll have to make tough decisions for your family. You'll have to make tough decisions for your organization. And the more empathy is involved, I mean, if you look at the way some of these leaders have handled the crisis, if you see the Prime Minister of Norway, she did a conference with children addressing their fears. I mean, who does that, right? Have you ever seen any prime ministers or leaders at that level having conference with children? So this is what is going forward going to be really valued, that whatever you do, you have to do it with kindness. And of course, this is something which can be developed. Emotional quotient is something which you can work on and which
Right.
you can acquire.
Right. So empathy to emotional quotient. Now, a lot of people, we do understand that both of us have studied emotional quotient and empathy. What's the difference when you talk about EQ and IQ? Why is it important to have? Firstly, the difference. So there are two questions: the difference between empathy and emotional quotient. And is emotional quotient? Why do we call it EQ? Why is it important than IQ? And is it measurable in sort? Right. So these are two questions. Firstly, कि empathy और उसमें difference क्या है? And the second is are we able to measure it in some sort? Is there like a barometer of some sort?
Yes. So when you're talking about EQ, right? And they always say, I'm sure you must have heard this because you're in HR, that IQ will get you the job, but it's EQ which will get you the promotion and moving forward. So of course,
Yes.
male leaders who have done well, and who are doing exceptionally well, they also have had a high degree of emotional quotient in them. And basically, when your EQ is high, then you are empathetic, you are more self-aware, you know about your own feelings, you're able to detach yourself from your feelings like anger, frustration, anxiety. You understand what other people are going through, so that's why you tailor your communication accordingly. I mean, communication is really important in leadership.
Yep.
The way you will communicate, if your EQ is high, is going to be very different, and it's going to be very sensitive as compared to when you're just involving IQ. So, for example, I often have these debates on LinkedIn, right, in which we try to debate certain things, and often you will see that people will be throwing in facts and say this is what it is, and this is how it is, and this is how it's going to be, and that's all good. But if you are not reasoning with the other person, and if you are not talking to that person in a kind tone or in a manner in which the person feels understood, then you will just be knocking your head against the wall.
Yes.
Very, very important that the person understands you.
Mm.
And this is the one question, right? Empathy is part of the EQ, you said. And the second question was, you said that what is the difference? IQ is, of course, your technical skills, how well you are doing certain things, the
Mm.
technical aspects of your job. And EQ is all the soft skills.
Amazing, amazing. So what my understanding now would be, there is a concept also known as service leadership, and obviously people say you need to be a self leader, but you need to serve others. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to bridge the gap, and what probably leadership as a holistic model would be coming out of the COVID for individuals, not for organizations, but for individuals. So I think service leadership is looking at the other person and trying to serve them the best we can, trying to understand their empathy, trying to understand being in their shoes, and trying to listen and communicate. One other thing that I also say is which is to have conversations rather than just communicate. So it's about the two-way interaction and to feel the empathy. Am I? Do I resonate with your thoughts?
Absolutely, absolutely. And Nadeem, I think having started my business in three different countries, first I built my brand in Pakistan, and then I went to Dubai, and then I went to London. And post COVID, I'll probably be, reinventing my business for a fourth time. So for me, I think what has really worked a lot of people say that you have a huge network and how do you make so many friends, and I think, and how, what's the secret. So I think other than being empathetic, another very important thing is when you are networking, you need to be, there has to be an element of reciprocity, because if you are not able to reciprocate and offer something to the other person, and I think the what we do, the mistake a lot of people do in networking and establishing a leadership brand is that they're very interested in knowing what the other person can offer to them, which is
Mm,
a very wrong approach. You need to start with what you can offer to the other person. How
yes,
can you help the other person?
that's
And I
that's very true.
and I think that is what builds relationships in the long term. It is not about how you will be served, how you will get benefit, and eventually you will. I mean, when you are going to, that you come from this service leadership kind of model, or
Yes,
when you're talking about serving people,
yes,
then eventually there will be a time when your leader, well, your needs will be serviced as well,
yes.
right? But you do need to look out for other people in the beginning.
Yes, I think it's now with the pandemic, it's all about taking care of others and having the empathy. Even if from inside, we as human beings, you've said that we're different, but I think taking and looking at the global situation, it's not. I was coaching the other day, and I was talking to one of my coachees, and I was telling her that this situation hasn't just happened to you. You need to see the wider picture. It's happened to everyone, and a lot of the times we're just inside the bubble that it's just me that it has happened to. But I think we need to understand and need to open up to the wider community, to the wider global impact that it's happened. And I think concepts like leaders emerging as coaches, leaders emerging as mentors is another aspect. How do you think, how important do you think it would be to there's also a concept of mentoring, there's also a concept of reverse mentoring. Can you touch on those topics and how important that is to develop, in the development cycle? We talk about reverse mentoring, and there's an age where you reach to, let's say, 45, 50, and you need to have reverse mentoring where I'm talking to a lot of organizations and saying, we've got CEOs, but they're not learning anything. So I offer them, why don't you do start off with reverse mentoring, where you peer up with someone who's young and who understands technology more, and that way the organization grows and the digital transformation happens. How important do you think that is with going forward?
I think reverse mentoring is one of the best ways in which you can actually develop an organization which is extremely inclusive. So it's not just pairing older people with junior people, but it's also pairing people from different ethnicities so that they can. So, for example, if I'm in pairing like a person who is from a Black Asian ethnic minority background with a person who is from a white background. So when that happens, there is a lot of things which are exchanged, which people learn about each other, which they ordinarily won't. So diverse mentoring is definitely something which is absolutely a brilliant concept. I'm a huge fan of it. I think these days people are very charitable. A lot of people are, it's International Coaching Week, so I have also been offering free coaching to people. And of course, it's the time
I,
I
I
get.
would like some as well.
So in a time like this, you're open to like coaching people about how they can build their brands. And I think you also need to be very vigilant about how you build your leadership brand going forward. If your brand is not coming across as somebody who is looking out for other people, or who's empathetic, or who's been doing community work, then I'm sorry, you're not going to create a very sustainable or a popular brand, as you would call it. If you really want going forward to work on your self leadership brand, then it has to be somebody who comes across as empathetic, as kind, as somebody you can trust. Because if those elements are not there, if people think that you only work for your own benefit and you're not out there to help other people, I'm the first person who's going to write about you because I write a lot, right? So if you have done anything, as an individual leader in your capacity, What have you done to help the people around you? Or as an organization, tell me, I'm going to write about you because I like writing a lot of articles. But it's important that, from henceforth, you have to understand that what exactly are you giving back to the society and how are you benefiting it.
So I think it's what you've talked about is the importance of trust and the importance of kind of creating that relationship moving forward. And I think giving back to the community, which is utmost important. I think a lot of developing countries, especially, need to understand this concept of giving back, because if we give back, the whole community grows, and it's not just you and I. So within, we're talking about being stuck in the house. How can we apply these concepts? Now, I know that I'm always learning from my younger children. Do you think it is important, all these concepts bringing together, and are they applicable at home as well? Do you think that?
So I have been locked out for like what, six 6 weeks, 8 weeks. But what I do is that where I can, I offer people coaching and mentoring for free. I don't do it. I will not lie. I'll say that I'm always offering free stuff because I don't. This is frankly my bread and butter. So I do have to charge at a certain point in time in future. But yes, I mean, you could do these. I have done so many webinars and I've written so many articles just to benefit readers and to help people in surviving and thriving in this hard time. So you could do that, or
Yes.
sitting at home, I connect people with different food campaigns. So I'm a part of different community groups in London here. And if I see that somebody is looking for something, then I will simply, sitting at home, connect them to the right people. Sometimes it's just about connecting people to the right people. It's Ramadan right now.
Yes.
And there are a lot of people who are not able to go to the mosque, unfortunately, because mosques are closed. So they are not able to access the food and money which they otherwise would have direct access to. So in that case, what would be best is to connect people to the right people and say, well, okay, I am in lockdown. I can't go because I don't own a car here in London. Yes, I don't because I live in central city, so I usually use the train. But at the same time, there are people with cars who are going out and doing these charity drives. So you can always do if you have
Yes.
that in your heart to help people.
Yes, I think it's to have the not just the capability but the willingness to help people. Now we're starting to take, because we've hit the 20-minute mark and we have 10 minutes for question answers. So anyone who's watching, all the listeners, all the people who are watching, please write in your questions, any questions that you have that you want to ask, whether they're relevant to the topic or any other question that you would want. I think just to clarify that, all the articles that people like us write, where both of us are authors, both of us write for different magazines. We hardly get paid, but the reason to do that is to share that knowledge to the wider circle, and that dedicated time, religiously or probably spiritually, gives us a lot of motivation to move forward. And people, unless they don't do that, they don't understand. There was recently on a Sunday, I received a message from someone from US, and they wanted to understand whether they should take a program in HR analytics or business intelligence. And it just took me hardly 5 minutes to respond to the person, but just to respond to that message gave me probably made my Sunday, because someone has reached out from far away and wants to ask a question, and he or she feels that I would, I'm an expert at this and I can answer him. So, a lot of people give you respect because you've earned it through all the 10, 15 years that you've put in. And I've seen your work, the kind of writing that you do. It does obviously motivate and I would say resonate with a lot of people, and they would reach out to you asking you a lot of questions, who might want to, someone who wants to become like you, or someone who wants to actually learn similar traits as you, or even maybe do something that can benefit the society. So if anyone has questions, I think Kinza is online and Javed Saab is online, and
Oh,
you have Javed Saab is also online. So if any of you have questions, please do feel free to ask us. Here there is like a 30-second delay time. So by the time they listen to us, we've actually talked about it.
yeah. Okay, that's no problem. But
Um,
yeah,
I have a question. How do you distinguish? How do you differentiate between? There are a lot of now. This is this is a question that I don't that I feel that should it's a frustration and burning point for consultants like ourselves. But how do you feel? Who's the person who you should offer for free and who should pay? It's important for consumers to understand, coming from both of us, and I can share my frustration as well, especially in the pandemic when businesses are shutting down and people want you to do freebies. We can do it for a certain level, but there is a cutoff point when we say no. But what is that cutoff point? As a leader, how do you decide? How do you decide?
So the thing is, when this initially happened, right, when this started, so at that time, I think most people like us in our community, we felt really bad about charging people because it was, of course, everybody was going through a global crisis, and it's understandable. And even things like which we're doing for individuals right now, I do a lot of free webinars, right? And that's fine. But when you're dealing with organizations, and I think organizations also need to respect this, that for us, we're consultants, right? So this is our bread and butter, and this is we can't really, if the organization has the budget, right, which a lot of organizations do, then you should definitely ask for payment and not do it for free, unless that organization is benefiting you in some way. If they're giving you some coverage, or if they're giving you some sort of uh, something in return which is going to benefit you in the longer run, then yes, absolutely do it for free. But if it's not benefiting you, and if it's, for example, I do free webinars for trading companies because I know that, like me, they're also right now going through a phase where they can't really pay because it's dependent on this. And individuals also, I would love to hand, to free stuff. But when you're doing webinars for organizations, I think organizations need to place a lot of value on the mental health and resilience and leadership skills, which are going to be important going forward. And
Hmm.
this is something which they should be ready to invest in, not just the technology.
Yes, yes.
So this is something which I think,
I think moving forward, I really resonate with this thought. We do have a question. I'll move on to the question, but just to clarify, when we're talking about technology, especially with the companies that I'm working with, it's important now to see the human element, as Hira, you've mentioned. What are the skills that human beings bring along? Because AI, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and algorithms are numerate, right? They can understand the data and the insights, but they can't understand the human element, which ultimately leads to intelligence, which is obviously wisdom, and that comes with empathy, that comes with emotional quotient, that comes with understanding other people behavior and the industry at large, what's happening, especially with the pandemic, because that has a lot of attachment to emotions. As you said, all of these leaders that are successful in all these countries, New Zealand and other places in Europe, are mostly females, and they've had a higher EQ. That's why they've been successful at curbing the COVID. So we move on to our first question, which is from Muhammad Babar, and he said that question: can we define the level of empathy and kindness, considering that we are leading and sometimes extra sensitive, could result in operational or control problems for leaders? Do you
yes,
understand the question?
yes, I think that's a good question. And that's the reason why, see, there are a lot of times where you'll have to take tough decisions, right? And a lot of employees are being unfortunately furloughed. A lot of people, company had to let go of the employees. And I'm not here to make judgments on that because I understand that every organization is going to have a different approach. But what I'm trying to say is that even when you are making these tough decisions, you could offer something extra to those people, which makes them realize that, this is a tough decision on you, but you have taken all measures in place to make sure that the other person is not just going to go and starve on the road. So, for example, you say that, I'll have to let go of these particular people, but at the same time, I'm offering free training on how to get a new job, or I'm offering free stuff, or we are probably providing a week's grocery for you, or a month of food, or whatever. I mean, little ways in which you can show to them that even though you had to make these tough decisions, but you are still going to take care of them. So being empathetic doesn't mean that you don't make tough decisions, that you never get rid of people. I mean, if it is an absolute necessity, then you probably have to. But show that there is care involved in that. That's what the point is.
I think I'd also like to add to what you've said, and this is just linking back to what you said earlier, Hira, is that involving other people. And I've said, in one of the previous talks is about strategy is now evolving your employees in the decisions that you're making. It's very important, even within these tough times. If you can involve your employees and ask them, I think initially there are companies that have actually their CEOs have done a pay cut, and also their employees have also done a pay cut of around 20 to 30%.
Absolutely.
So what happens is, if the overall people need to understand the workforce budget is incorporates around 70 to 80% of the overall organizational budget, and the costs that are involved. Obviously, operations are shut down, but there is still a workforce kind of budget that goes every month to the salary, and that would accumulate to losses. What would eventually happen is, if the leadership steps up, as you had mentioned earlier, if they're more empathetic and have a higher EQ, they can talk to their employees and they can ask them, what should we do going forward? I don't want to lay off people, but I don't want to. I'm unable to pay your 100% salary. So I think that, and then give them time to understand. And I think this is the right way moving forward, as you said. If they're empathetic, if they care about their employees will care about them going forward, and they'll care about the whole organization. And we are seeing these revolutions that are happening with different companies when they're not laying off people. Obviously, there is.
And senior people are also taking cuts. So it's
Yes.
not that you are left to bear the brunt. I mean, they are equally there in this together. When you're talking about that,
Hmm.
they are actually stepping up and saying, okay, fine, I'm going to sacrifice my profits and my salaries too. I'm going to step back and say that I'm going to get less salary. If you are getting less salary, so will I. So then that in the long term, it develops very long sustainable relationships, I believe.
Thank you so much, Hira. My last question for you would be: in the whole pandemic that has happened, how do we practice empathy? Now, going towards the practical side of it, we've talked about, empathy is a concept, EQ is a concept, but can you give our users some tips to actually practice it? And your book is also being launched in Pakistan. I want to give a shout out to that. It's being launched by Octara, so congrats on that. When is the date? When is the date? When can we join the webinar?
The webinar is on 19th of May.
19th of May. That's
Yes,
great.
yeah, and it's in the afternoon. So I'm
It's
going
in,
to put a link in your YouTube or whatever.
yes, please do that. Please do that. I will definitely share that link as well. But before you go, I think a
The
couple
tip,
of sorry,
yes,
a
the
couple
tip.
of practical tips on how do we practice empathy.
I think the first thing, Nadeem, I would say is charity begins at home.
Okay.
So you should begin being empathetic towards your own family, because I do see that right now you have to acknowledge that. I'm not sure what the situation is in different houses, but women are obviously going through a lot of stress because I'm a woman. I'm going to speak out for that and say that there is a lot of pressure on women to kind of manage their own work, the household chores, the cooking, the cleaning, keeping people fed for like the whole day round, and making sure that everything is in place. So I think, like this, the charity begins at home, empathy begins at home. So try and be supportive towards your partner, and I'm sure a
Yes.
lot of them do, like you are one of them. I know my husband is thankfully,
Thank you.
I know, who's an extremely supportive partner, and he will make sure that he's going to reach out and say that where it is you need help. So if we can start this at home and support and understand that because obviously I think there's no help coming anywhere at all right now. Everybody is working on their own. So if they could start this, and just by just thinking, like I am the sort of person who doesn't believe in battles like, oh, let's have a gender debate, females are better, or let's have like a debate on ethnicities, or victim. I don't believe in all that. I just believe in open dialogue, and I believe that you can get everybody to agree with you if you're able to accept your own faults and say, okay, this is where I was wrong.
Yes.
Okay. This is where I am going to accept where I was wrong, but this is where you have to accept where you were wrong. And
Mm.
that's how it's going to be going forward, where you are able to step back and literally, not be so mired in your ego that you're not ready to listen to other people. So just ask yourself this question:
Mhm, mhm.
what is it that how would I like other people to talk to me in this scenario?
Mm. I think as a male, I can really resonate with what you're saying. Initially, I used to ask my wife, let me know if you need any help, and then I changed that going forward. Obviously, there's been we've been married for a long time now, and then I moved to my stance to how can I help you, and she said. And I kind of, with the body language, I understood that she wants me to be more active. So now, instead of even asking that, I move forward and, go ahead and do stuff. And then I asked her, do you need help with this? Do you need help with that? And I try to do as much as I can, because we're both in a lockdown with kids.
Mm.
And if you see, one room is a mess, and then the other room is a mess, and one wants to get into a webinar in one room, and then we need to clean up. We need to be able to probably manage the kids, manage our work, and manage all the kind of the tough debates that are happening, both from my end and from her end, because I think we're all struggling. I wouldn't say that I'm just struggling or you're struggling.
Everybody
I think
is.
everyone's struggling. So it's important to have these webinars where we say, although we're both established authors, we're writing here and there, but we're also, I think, trying to make our ends meet. And that's very important for the audience to know, that we're all in this together, you know.
Yes.
Um,
One last thing, Nadeem, I want to add is
yes.
that when you're dealing with other people and when you feel angry and frustrated, just understand this, that every person's coping mechanism is very different from yours. So, when you wear tinted glasses and when you wear red glasses, you see the world is red. And when you see wear blue glasses, you see the world is blue. So, everybody is going to view the world from his or her tinted glasses. And sometimes those reactions and those responses are going to be very different from how you are going to react and respond. So do understand this. And I think that is one of the biggest tip for empathy, is to know that every people might be very different from you. Everybody's going to have their own experience, which they're going to reflect in the way they respond. So if you are open to that, then I think it's just going to be very helpful for all of us.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I'll just try to I'll try to reflect on the whole session just to close it down. We've had amazing responses, but I don't see the questions coming. I'm seeing a lot of people are resonating with what we're saying, so I'm not putting them up as questions. So I think we started off with understanding what leadership overall all is, empathy, emotional quotient, and later on understanding other people and building more or less, a community where we of I think followers, or say, establish ourselves as an empathetic or a self and service leader. And I think looking at other people and servicing their needs before we service our own needs. And I think that's how the leader will emerge. The last that we did talk about was, how do we practice this? I think listening is a very important skill that we've touched upon. Communication, conversations, and I think understanding other people has also, you've also pointed that out throughout the talk. I think what uh, what I would like to ask you is, a lot of people don't are still confused with understanding their purpose in life. How important do you think it is for a leader to understand their purpose? We are going to be touching on this in the next session, but just a brief line so that this can transcend to our talk tomorrow. How important do you think, if a leader without a purpose and a leader with a purpose, what would the difference be for you?
I think a person or a leader who has a purpose is definitely going to be extremely self-motivated, and because these are trying times, and you really need to self-motivate yourself, because it's just going to be difficult going forward. I'm not going to promise that it's going to be an easy world, but if you have a purpose by which you are driven, whatever it is, if you have a passion for it, then chances are, even when you are facing crisis, you will continue to persist. And that's the reason why it's important. Like passion, strength, and the market should pay. That's the three intersection of being a true business leader.
Thank you so much, Hira. I think we end with this note. Tomorrow, all the viewers and listeners, we have a session on purpose where Sarim will be joining us from Pakistan. We have people joining us from across the globe, and it has truly been an amazing experience, Hira, for you to join us. I haven't mentioned this, but we're from the same alma mater. So that, it's just, obviously you're very senior. I wouldn't say very senior in that sense, but experience wise, experience wise. But it's I think it's been a learning journey for me to be talking to you as well, and to understand that I'm just not in it alone. And I think the listeners will also understand that the reason for these sessions are to kind of open up, to reset ourselves. I'd like to pose a question to the viewers. Are you becoming reset? Are you basically reflecting? Are you looking at these sessions and reflecting on what we're doing? So I think that is the real purpose of these sessions. So I'd like to end with this note. I'll see you tomorrow at 3:30, inshallah, and we will continue our talk with finding purpose. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for joining us. If you have any questions, my last question to Hira, how can people join? How can people connect with you online? If obviously this is people are connected to me, but I want them to be connected to you. So what is the best way? Is it Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram? What is the best way?
I'm most active on Twitter at Advancing You. That's my handle, Twitter handle, and LinkedIn. I'm there as Hira Ali Career Coach. So
Okay.
please feel, you're most welcome to follow me and send out questions, and I'll be happy to respond.
Can you please repeat the Twitter one? Your voice was
It's Advancing You. It's at
advancing.
Advancing You. Yes.
Okay, that's great. So anyone who wants to connect to Hira, feel free to connect either on LinkedIn. I will tag you after this video is done. And also you can add her on Advancing You on Twitter. Thank you so much. Have a great evening, everyone. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you.